So I flew to the United States, and he said, well, I haven't been honest completely, because I have two propositions for you, and one of them is to form an entire new lineup of Vandenberg around you with top-class American or English musicians. So his second proposition was, I would really like you to join Whitesnake. I said, well, that sounds familiar. I said, I need to think about it for 1 or 2 days, and in the meantime, he said, well, while you're here, would you like to make a new guitar arrangement for Here We Go Again and play a new guitar solo on it, because they were not happy with John Sykes' stuff on it, which surprised me, because as we know, John Sykes is a fucking great player. But Joe Colodner literally said, well, he didn't think the approach that John Sykes had for Here We Go Again was the right one.
So but first, don't forget to subscribe the channel here and turn on the notifications. So, and today you have Adrian Vandenberg from here with us. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I got the flu since yesterday. That's always a little bit boring, because it's a waste of time. But I usually try to ignore it, maybe get like an hour extra sleep. I don't sleep that much, but it's supposed to be a smart thing to do.
Okay.
And get your vitamins and stuff.
Okay.
Adrian, it seems that you didn't get old. You seem the same guy from the 20s in the Vandenberg. Your visual, your appearance.
It's very good.
Well, that's good news, I suppose. I don't know. I do keep. I do take care of my health, but not in a ridiculous way. I love to cook, so that's for me makes a difference, because I always make sure I got healthy stuff. I get a little bit of exercise, but not ridiculously much. I do some stuff on my bicycle and I roller skate a bit, But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose rock and roll doesn't give me the chance to get older, I suppose.
Yes.
That's nice. So, Leandro, want to start the first question?
Yes, Adrian. How came along this partnership with Matt 11, and how do you decide to bring him to the band after the last album 2020 featuring Ronnie Romero? Why did you decide to bring Matt 11 from the band?
Well, the whole COVID situation, like for everybody, threw the whole thing upside down. And if you remember, when 2020 came out, COVID just broke loose all over the world, and they threw everything upside down for every band, every artist, and every job, actually, for everybody, So normally in 2020 we had a big tour planned, and of course we couldn't do that. So by the time that people started to go out again, Ronnie lives in Romania, and in that part of the world, people were allowed to go out a little earlier than in other parts of the world. And in Holland, they were very strict, and in most other countries too, United States, you name it. And so by the time that I was ready to tour with my band, Ronnie had a couple of obligations as far as shows, because he was able to, to start doing shows earlier than we were. And I didn't really want to wait that long, because we were ready to tour. And so unfortunately, I had to start looking for another singer. And suddenly I remembered Mats from his great work with Imje Malmsteen, a fellow player, as you know. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think about that guy earlier. And so I got in touch with him, and he was really excited, because he told me that when I started Vandenberg's Moon Kings, by now it's about 9 years ago or something, I think. He was a little disappointed that I didn't get in touch with him at the time, but I didn't think about it, and when I did, he was, when I got in touch with him, he was really excited, and he told me that His mom brought the first two Vandenberg albums back to Scandinavia for him when he was, in his early 20s, and he couldn't get those albums in the city where he lived at the time. So it was quite a coincidence, actually, how things fell together, So we started working, and it's going really, really great, as everybody can see on YouTube.
Yes, I think it's a good choice. Mets 11 has that punch that you have to have in your records. Like David Coverdale, that choice was a proposal or not?
Not really. I mean, to my surprise, well, not really surprised, because as we know, he's a fantastic singer, and he's got a similar timbre than as David has. So he is able, because Mats, as you know, he's got a great range and he sings very expressively. So it was great to hear how he approaches the Whitesnake songs that we also play. He said we do a lot of Whitesnake songs because I was with Whitesnake for almost 12 years, and I hadn't played those songs in about 30 years. So for me, it's a great kick. I go, oh man, it takes me back 30 years and it feels great. So yeah, it was more, I didn't really think at the time about, because Mats and I have been working together for 3 years now, I wasn't thinking at the time about playing that many Whitesnake songs in a set, but that's something that came up the last 6 months. We're really enjoying it, and the people go crazy, So we have a very wide choice song-wise for our sets. We play classic Vandenberg stuff, we play some recent Vandenberg stuff, and now we play a lot of Whitesnake stuff in the set as well, which is great, I love it.
Yes, I listened to the Sin, the 2023 album that you released as a Vandenberg. Is one of the best releases in this recent years.
Thank you.
I didn't listen in the time were 1 year behind, but it's awesome. I have a thought that didn't listen before. It's very similar to you did in the Slip of the Tongue. Still talking, was proposal, is it intentional to seek in that way or not?
It's not. It's more a natural thing, because that has to do the way I write. As was very important for David at the time to ask me to join Whitesnake. David literally said at the time that a bunch of the songs on the first two Vandenberg albums could have been Whitesnake songs, in his opinion, and that was a reason why David and I write very well together. And the same goes for Mats, of course. But yeah, with David, actually we were working on a new recording for the Slip of the Tongue album of my song Burning Heart. But then when I got a wrist problem, I couldn't finish it, of course. So we didn't record it for that. But that's the way I write songs, and that's why it worked really well with David and I when we wrote together, because we have very similar influences. Our influences are usually blues-based and with more power and with a little bit more melody. So it's a very natural thing, and that's how I write. That's how I've always written. If you have a chance and you can listen to something for my very first own band called Teaser when I was about 20, that's the kind of material I wrote back then also, and on the Vandenberg albums. So for me, it's a natural thing,
Yes.
So my next question, it's about the Netherlands scenes, because you know that the Netherlands is a source of a big bands of heavy metal with wonderful bands. So how the rock scene is like in the country, and how is Vandenberg seen in the country?
Vandenberg was in the 80s the biggest rock band there was in Holland. I have to confess, I'm not very familiar with what's happening in Holland rock bands, because I look at the whole world, and there's so many great bands in the United States, in England, you name it, So I'm not really familiar. I know a couple of names. You know, of course, I know Within Temptation. I know a band called Pestilence, which is from my hometown of Enschede. But I don't know their music. I do listen a lot to music, of course, because I love music. It's my life. But at home, when I put on rock, then it's usually the kind of rock that I've always preferred to listen, and it goes way back to the 70s, all the way up to now. But it's generally not in the metal corner of music. So yeah, I listen to stuff like AC/DC, Van Halen, Kings of Leon, Cream, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Rainbow, all the stuff that influenced me actually more than a lot of stuff from the last 10-15 years. So I'm not very good at home in the metal scene, so to speak.
Yes. And talking about your first album, Adrian Vandenberg, was successful in the Western world and is considered one of the most rock underrated albums. What do you think was the missing to maintain the success on the sequence albums like Alibi?
Yeah, it's always in the end, it's always a combination of timing, of the promotion from your record company, because your record company, one of their jobs is to make sure that everybody knows about your new record. The problem with between the first and the second Vandenberg album was that the president of Atlantic Records, who signed us and who discovered my band, he left Atlantic Records, and at the same time, the president of Edco, that was a part of Atlantic Records in the United States, she left as well. It was a lady. So the album came out, and the people who were behind us at the first album were suddenly gone. So we fell, as the expression in Holland goes, between the K and the ship. You know, if you know what I mean. You know, you walk from the K to the ship, and suddenly, goop, you go down. And that's what happened. So there was not really a lot of promotion with the second album, barely any, even though we recorded 2 so-so videos, but nobody did anything with it. So that was a very big part of it. And the same thing happened with the Alibi album. We suddenly had to work with a German A&R manager who tried to convince me to go the direction of Duran Duran. And I said, man, that's not rock, you know. I'm a rock guy. I write rock music, and so that went totally wrong as well, you know. And it happened to a lot of bands over the years, where you hear a record and you go, man, that record should have been big, you know, and nobody knew about it. So yeah, that's the shitty part of this business, you know. You work your ass off on a record, and then you throw it into the world, and you hope that the people who work with it are just as motivated as you are, and that's very often not the case, you know.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the Manic Eden, the album, the project. In 1994, the Manic Eden project appeared. So how did you decide? Can you talk about a little bit about how did you decide to create that group?
Yeah, what happened was in 1994, David was going to do a project with Jimmy Page, as you remember. So Tommy, Rudy, and I didn't want to sit on our asses, and we put together Manic Eden. So I started writing songs for it, and we started working with a singer called James Christian, and that didn't work out at all. So when we already had recorded the songs, we decided to continue with Ron Young, the singer who was known as a singer for Little Caesar, and it worked out really well. It's one of the very favorite albums that I've always in my life, my career, or whatever you want to call it. One of my very favorite albums that I'm involved in. and there was a European tour planned. I mean, to be honest, the timing of that album, as you remember, they were weird times for rock, because grunge was suddenly really hip and stuff, and on the radio, the kind of rock that I love and that a lot of fans love wasn't suddenly on the radio and on TV anymore. So you had to be. It was very hard to get promoted for that album, but we did have a very extensive tour planned. But I got into a very difficult personal situation, namely David's project with Jimmy Page was supposed to last quite a while. They were going to do a tour. Sorry, I got a sneeze, but I'm trying to keep it.
No problem.
Sorry about the sniffing, but yeah, I just told you I got the flu.
No problem.
No problem.
So they ended up only doing 2 or 3 shows in Japan, and that was it. So suddenly David called me up and said, well, are you up for picking up Whitesnake again? So that was for me a very, very, very difficult choice, because Manic Eden, I felt it like it was my baby. But at the same time, I realized I've been with Whitesnake in the peak of their period, and because of my wrist accident at the time, my wrist problem, I couldn't play on the album that I wrote with David, the Slip on the Tongue album, which is why we had to bring Steve Vai in. So I thought, man, I've been in Whitesnake for that great period, and there's not an album that I play on. So I had to decide to stop with Manic Eden. Sorry.
No problem.
Which was a very, very difficult decision, and I still, have a bad feeling about it, because I thought it was a great band. It was a great album, even though the times are very difficult for this kind of music. I think if it would have been released now and we would have been able to do a tour, it would have been different, but it wasn't. I mean, we're talking about 30 years ago, so yeah, it got re-released a little while ago by my record company Mascot, which I'm really happy about, because over the years I got a lot of questions where people could find that record because they heard one of the tracks on YouTube, So I'm happy it got re-released, and like I said, I'm really proud of it. It's a great album, I think.
Yes, it's awesome. And why James Christian leave the band? I think the Ronnie Wood fits better than James Christian vocals, but why decide to leave the band?
Well, there were a couple of very strange. We had to stop working with him. I know he's in interviews he says that he left, but that's bullshit. We had to stop working with him because I don't want to damage his reputation. But let's put it this way: he did a bunch of strange, secretive things on a personal level and on a business level that made us decide, we can't keep working with this guy, because if it already starts being like that in the very beginning of a project, imagine what could happen later on when the project moves forward, So we decided to stop working with him and approach Ron Young.
Yes. So let's come back for the beginning. You create the iconic covers from the first albums of the Vandenberg, Heading for the Storm, Alibi. I don't know if you painted the first album from the Vandenberg too. How do you decide to start painting? And you made an exhibition of your canvas and your fine paintings or not?
Yes. Well, the thing is, what a lot of people don't know apparently. That was my profession. I went to art university, and I worked as an artist, as a painter, and I did very well, unfortunately. So music, I did not have the illusion that I could make a living with the kind of music that I want to play, which is rock. In Holland, that's very, very difficult. It's difficult everywhere because it's a specific kind of music that you have to like or you don't, And especially in the early 80s when I started Vandenberg, I went with a cassette demo of my music to all the record companies in Holland, and all of them said, well, no, it's not popular music, you know, so forget about it. And synthesizer pop was popular in the early 80s, you know, so nobody dared to sign my band until my manager and I started sending out cassettes to international companies like Atlantic and Chrysalis and Vertigo and all those guys, and they all reacted right away, so they loved it, and that's why we got signed to Atlantic internationally instead of just a record deal in Holland, which was a great deal because Burning Heart became a big hit in all over the world, and it helped us tour and play everywhere, you know. So I already made the cover painting for the teaser album, which was my first band when I was 20, because I was at Art University at the time. So I was a big fan of people like Salvador Dali and the old Dutch masters like Rembrandt, Frans Hals, Vermeer, but also later on Van Gogh, Karel Appel, all those guys, which is why the painting that I made for the Manic Eden album is totally different. So when I made the painting for the Sin album, I thought it would be cool to make a painting again in the style that I did in the early Vandenberg albums, you know, to connect them, because I was working under the name of Vandenberg again.
Yes. And we begin to talk about Whitesnake. I would like to know, I know, but people are watching that interview, many of them didn't know. How was the invitation to join the Coverdale's band?
It was great. It was exciting, and the timing was finally right, because David has been approaching me when the first Vandenberg album came out. He already asked me to join Whitesnake, but I told him, man, I would love to, because I'm a big David Coverdale fan, I still am. But the timing wasn't right, because I just signed a contract with Atlantic, and the first album was about to come out. It wasn't even out, you know. So the second time was when Whitesnake was headlining the Donington Festival, and David invited me backstage and said, so, have you changed your mind yet? I said, well, bad timing again, because I was again in Jimmy Page's studio to record the second Vandenberg album. I said, man, you know, I can't do it, because I'm recording the second album, you know. And he said, okay, let's stay in touch. So we did stay in touch every year or so, you know. I got a message from him or from his manager or whatever. So in 1986, the end of 1986, my manager and I managed to get rid of the Vandenberg contract with Atlantic, because after the situation with a German A&R manager who tried to push me into Duran Duran direction, we tried to get rid of our contract with Atlantic, and we did. So I got approached by John Kalodner, who was the A&R manager at Geffen Records, and he was involved with Whitesnake and Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses, yes, and all the guys. Sorry, I have to.
No problem.
No, okay.
So he called me up. Actually, he called my mother up, because he called. That is the phone number he had through David's people, and he said, "Are you willing to come over to the United States, to LA, to talk to me about a new Vandenberg contract?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd love to, you know," because he found out that I was free to sign, and so I flew to the United States, and he said, "Well, I haven't been honest completely, because I have two propositions for you, and one of them is to form an entire new lineup of Vandenberg around you with top-class American or English musicians." And I thought, okay, you know, I need some time to think about it, because that was the third time that somebody suggested that to me already in the very beginning, you know, that the president of Atlantic was not convinced that the other guys at Vandenberg were at the right level. And the second time was the manager that we had in the United States, Ken Adamany, he also said the same thing. So that was the third time. So I thought, well, you know, I can be pretty stubborn. Maybe I should start realizing that those guys are not stupid, you know. So his second proposition was, I would really like you to join Whitesnake. I said, well, that sounds familiar. You know, I heard it before. And so I said, I need to think about it for 1 or 2 days, you know. And in the meantime, he said, well, while you're here, would you like to make a new guitar arrangement for Here We Go Again and play a new guitar solo on it? Because they were not happy with John Sykes' stuff on it, which surprised me because, as we know, John Sykes is a fucking great player. But John Colodner literally said, well, he didn't think the approach that John Sykes had for Here We Go Again was the right one. I found out later that John was already, you know, David already stopped working with John in the 2 weeks before that. So I stayed in the studio and I recorded a new solo for Here I Go Again, and I played some other guitar parts on Here I Go Again, and that was it. So I went home and I thought, man, if I go with the first proposition, I would never find, or he would never find, a singer of David Coverdale's caliber, you know. As we all know, he's amazing. So I thought, man, maybe this is the right time, you know, after those earlier invitations. So I decided to join David, and it was just the two of us at the time because there was no other. I knew later that Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldis got approached. I heard it in the weeks later, so I thought, oh great, you know. So yeah, that was it.
Slip of the Tongue is considered one of the best albums for many fans of the Whitesnake. It's composed everything with you and David, yeah?
Yes.
But you didn't record, yeah? Would you like to have record something different that Stevie did or not?
Well, it was very, very frustrating, of course. A lot of people ask me how would a Slip of the Tongue would have sounded if you played on it, and I tell them, you know, listen to the Sin album. That's how it would have sounded. At the same time, you know, of course, in the period when it happened, it was really, really frustrating, of course. So I can imagine very well how John Sykes must have felt when David stopped working with him, even though he recorded on that album. But he couldn't tour on it because, you know, he was not in the band anymore. So I do understand how frustrating it must have been for him, and probably still is. At the same time, with the Sin album, I was able to show the people how it would have sounded. I have a totally different style than Steve, of course, does. Steve and I became really good friends during that tour. I was after, you know, that frustrating period when I was looking to get doctors to get my wrist problem solved. I was at the same time, I realized, man, you know, as frustrating as it is, it's still a big kick that somebody of Steve Vai's caliber plays my music, you know. So if it would have been a shitty guitar player, I would have gone, oh, geez, you know. But Steve put his sound and his mark on it. And I think it turned into a very interesting album that way, because it's two different styles coming together in a great rock record, you know. So I'm really proud of it still.
Yes, in my opinion, the album, if was recorded with by you, I think that sounds more heavier. A heaviest sound is a sound. I prefer the heaviest sound as that was recorded by Stevie Vai, but in the time you can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
You think so? The same. You think that you put more heavy in the sound?
Oh yeah. It would have sounded, as I mentioned, like the Sin album. You know, it's a different style, and I always thought that is a style that belongs to Whitesnake, because I was a Whitesnake fan way before I was in the band, you know. I was a Whitesnake fan ever since David started Whitesnake, because I became a Coverdale fan when he was in Deep Purple. and I loved Deep Purple just as much when him and Glenn Hughes joined Deep Purple, because it gave it a lot of power, a different kind of power than it had before. I've been a Deep Purple fan ever since Deep Purple and Rock. It was like an eye opener for everybody. It was just an amazing album. If you play it back right now, after all those years, it's still amazing. So over the years, Deep Purple has evolved, and it's great to see that they still play, because man, those guys are legendary, of course, you know.
So you're considered one of the best guitarist duos of time with as a Steve Vai. What is the difference in styles between you and Stevie Vai?
I think the clearest difference is that my playing is a combination of blues influences and classical influences, and Steve has got his own planet. Steve, there's a reason why Steve joined Frank Zappa when he was 19. I would think Steve's playing is almost like surrealistic. If you compare it to paintings, Steve would be a surrealistic painter.
Yes.
But so was I. But I was more influenced by surrealistic painters like Salvador Dali, who have a classic style, but at the same time come up with something new. Whereas Steve, it's unexpected stuff happening, unexpected choice of notes, a great technique, of course, that goes without saying. I am more old school in that respect, because the players that I grew up on, Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Leslie West, Eric Clapton, Michael Schenker, all those guys, those were the guys that I grew up on. And Brian May, definitely big influence. There's been a lot of players that I still listen to, because sometimes when you get stuck in a rut, as it's called in British or in American, when you think, why did I start playing again? I listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan or to Jeff Beck or to Jimi Hendrix and go, oh yeah, that's the reason why I started playing. So then I get excited again and I come up with new stuff, and new licks, because I don't have the patience to really practice. So when I pick up a guitar, I just play and see what happens. And I think, oh, that sounded pretty cool. And then I try to figure out what I did and repeat it a couple of times, so it gets into my head, That's how it works with me. I mean, I'm a strange guy, I guess.
Yes. And Starkers in Tokyo is considered one of the best unplugged albums of all time. But when recorded, I think that David Coverdale and still you didn't imagine that album will be accepted so good, so well accepted. Did you think that, or you think that the album will be atemporal?
Well, at the time, it was not meant to be an album. It was a competition on Japanese radio, where people could win. The people who won, I think there were about 80 people or 60 people who could win to come to the studio and to listen to David and I play acoustic. So when we finished that radio show, it was live on radio. We realized, oh, wait a minute, it's going to be live on radio, so before you know it, it's going to be copied and somebody's going to release it. So David was smart and he told his record company, let's do it ourselves and release it ourselves before other people do. So yeah, it became a very successful album, and it must have been the cheapest Whitesnake album ever, because it didn't cost anything, We went into the studio in the evening and remixed it just to make sure that it sounded just a little bit better, It already sounded great on radio, of course, because in Japan, the technicians are amazing. But that was it. So yeah, it was great, and I'm really proud of it, because that's I don't know if you know what Starkers means, but Starkers in English means naked. So Starkers in Tokyo, naked, as a symbolism of just a guitar player and a singer and nothing else, you know. So it was 100% honest. That's what we did. That's how we played, and that was it.
Yes. And why do you were absent from 17 years without release any album after the Stars from Tokyo? You released the very first album as the Moon King 17 years later. Yeah, why?
I stayed together with David up until 1998 because we did tour. We toured in 1994 and we toured in 1997-98. So the end of 1998, David wanted to stop with everything because he wasn't feeling well and he wanted to stop touring because he didn't seem to enjoy it anymore. In 1999, I was with a girlfriend at the time, and she got a baby. Mm-hmm. Or actually, we got a baby, and she got pregnant. And I thought, that's great, you know. I want to be there for that. Of course, I didn't want to tour and record records because that's a very important thing. But when the baby was 3 years old, the relationship fell apart. And we were married, and it appeared to be a very difficult period. And I thought, you know, if I'm gonna record now and start a band and start touring, then I will be one of those fathers who sticks his head around the corner of the door and goes, "I'm your father, but I have to go," you know. So when that relationship went wrong, I wanted to be an important part in the life of my daughter. I thought, you know what, I'm going to live off my paintings for about 10, 11 years, which is what I did, until she's old enough that I can explain to her what I actually do and what I did before, you know. So when my daughter was about 11 or 12, she was old enough to explain, and she thought it was really cool because there were kids at her school who goes, "Oh, is that your dad? You know, he's famous and he's got long hair and all that stuff." So until she was 11 or 12, for her it was totally normal, you know, that I played some guitar and I was painting and all that stuff. So that's when I started Moon Kings, about when she must have been 12 or something. And, you know, I really missed playing and touring and doing shows and all that stuff. So I was happy to pick it up again. And I thought, well, the world will have forgotten about me, of course. That would have been totally normal. Because that's how it goes, you know. Pop music is called pop music because people, when it started with bands like the Beatles and pop artists and stuff in the 60s, people thought, oh, you know, that's the kind of music you throw away. You know, it's pop music, popular music. That's music you forget after about a couple of months. But it's never gone away, fortunately, because that's why I didn't go away either. I'm still here.
Yeah.
Yes, and still talking about Whitesnake and the Restless Heart album, they're finally an album that you recorded all of the album. Yeah. And what's your feeling about the album in, I think, almost 30 years after your releasing? What do you think about the album looking back almost 30 years?
Well, I think it's a great album. David and I decided to go back a little bit more to the original sound of Whitesnake, like in between, powerful blues rock. And there's one thing that I thought could have been more to my liking, because the initial mixes were made by Mike Fraser, who was also the sound engineer for bands like AC/DC and The Cult and all that stuff. So initially it was meant as a little bit of a little bit heavier than it turned out to be. But you know, David decided to bring in Mike Shipley, who passed away unfortunately. Great sound mixer also. And also there were one or two songs on there that were more rock and roll, more up tempo, more rock. But I think also the record company was also influential in deciding, well, you know, it's a strange time, it's the grunge is happening, so maybe it should be a little bit more of a polite album. I still think it's a great album. I think it's timeless. David is singing great, of course, on it. And yeah, at the time I was a little disappointed that we didn't really do more touring on it, because we could have, you know, done a lot more in the United States. We didn't tour the United States for that album. And it had to do with the fact that David changed record company. You know, there's another situation that, like what happened with Vandenberg, with the between Heading for a Storm and Alibi. When you got stuff happening with the record company, you know, that they drop the ball, so to speak. They're not going to do anything about it. And that happened in the States with Restless Heart. So I'm really happy it got re-released a couple of years ago. And it's a great re-release, you know. Maybe you've seen it, you know, it's a beautiful package. It's very special. And I'm really proud of it. I think it's a great album, you know.
Yes, it is.
Yes, I have a friend of mine here in my city that's a big fan of you, and he's a guitarist here. So he asked me a question about your guitar. So how many guitars do you have?
I think I have about 25 guitars, or 30 or something, or somewhere between 20 and 30. I used to have about 60. A couple of years ago, I sold a bunch because in the end, I always realize, you know, there's a couple of guitars that I play, always, and there's a lot of guitars that I kind of don't really touch anymore. So it's an interesting question, because I think I should get rid of a couple of them, you know, because they just sit there, and I'd rather have somebody else enjoy them than I call them my orphan guitars, because because I don't really see them anymore, you know. So yeah, I have too many guitars, and that's doesn't make any sense. It's I talked about it, of course, to every other guitar player pretty much, because most guitar players have something we call an acquiring syndrome. Like, you run into a certain guitar, you go, oh man, that's such a great guitar, I gotta have it. And then you get it, and you play it for a while, and then it sits there. So I end up always playing my Les Pauls, the one that I bought brand new when in 1980. I play a couple of my PV guitars, of course. I'm happy it got re-released, because everybody kept asking me about it. I play some of my Fender Telecasters and my Fender Stratocasters, and that's about it, you know. All the other ones, yeah, my acoustic, of course. But the acoustic that I recorded Starkers in Tokyo with, I still have it. And that's one that I use on all my recordings also, and I do my acoustic shows with it, so that's how it is.
And of course, that you have some painted guitar by you, or not?
No, actually, a couple of years ago, there was an auction. Somebody approached me to paint on one guitar that they wanted to sell for a good cause on an auction for kids that are terminally ill. So yeah, I painted on a Stratocaster guitar and gave it away.
Oh,
so maybe I should do it sometimes.
Yes. So we are following to the last minutes of the interview. We would like to talk with you 3-4 hours, but you need to recover to came here to Brazil, yeah?
Yeah.
What are your expectations about the shows here in Brazil? Are you excited?
I'm really looking forward to it, because as you probably know, the last time I played in Brazil was in Whitesnake, and I love South America, and I love South American wines also. I have a bunch of them. It's just a strange realization that it's so long ago that I played there. So to be honest, I can't wait. I know it sounds like a cliche, because I suppose everybody says that, you know. But I'm really looking forward to it, and I would love to come back with the whole band instead of just with Mats. So Mats and I look at it as we're opening the door to come back with the whole band and kick some ass.
Yes.
It's only a few shows, but I'm really gonna enjoy it. I'm already looking forward to it very much.
Yes. And did you know some guitar players from Brazil, like Kiko Loureiro, Andreas Kisser, or not? Did you like some of guitar
Yeah,
players or not?
that's a question that I would like to do again.
Yeah, I have heard some names. I do know that I have. Sometimes I put compilation tapes, which I do now on Spotify, with acoustic players from all over the world, including Brazilian players, including Spanish players, guys like Paco de Lucia and those kind of players. I know there's a couple of Brazilian players in there too, especially like the bossa nova type of players. But I must say I can't remember the names because I put it on a list on a package that plays. When it's summer and I sit on the terrace behind the house, put on smoke a cigar, which is what I started to do that a couple of 2 years ago. I don't smoke, but I like the aroma of a of a cigar. Cigar, guitar. It sounds very similar.
Sitar. Yeah.
So sometimes I sit behind the house. I smoke a cigar probably like 10, 15 times per year, and I don't even smoke it all the way. But I just like the smell around it, and then have acoustic guitar music playing in the background, and it really relaxes me. So that's when I listen to that kind of playing. And I know there's great bands from South America, bands called Sepultura, for instance. Great band, and there's so much music to be discovered from other countries that sometimes it's overwhelming. You go, oh man, I want to look into that, but life is short, and you try to do everything you like, which in my case is a lot. I like traveling, I like reading, I like watching movies, I like cooking, I like making music, I like painting, I like hanging with my friends. Life is too short. So I promised my daughter I was going to be 125 years old. So I hope to be able to do all that stuff that I like.
Oh, yes. So to finish our interview, Adrian, I want to know what's the 3 best albums of all time for you.
Ooh, I have a lot, but off the top of my head, I would go for Jimi Hendrix. Band of Gypsies, probably, because it's a live album and his playing is amazing. But all the Hendrix albums, actually. Okay, I have to pick one. Band of Gypsies album. I would go for Led Zeppelin #1, and I would go for it's difficult. I'm gonna have to choose between the band The Free, and between Cream, and between Rainbow, and between Led Zeppelin, and between I would. It's difficult.
Yes.
Of course, Van Halen, AC/DC, I love all that stuff, but I would probably. And then the third one would be Van Halen #1, I suppose. To try to cover as much ground as possible. Yes. But it would be more comfortable if it would have been a top 20.
Yes.
Then who would be in there? Would be Queen, Rainbow, Deep Purple, of course Led Zeppelin. Van Halen, AC/DC, Mountain, lots.
And out of the rock and roll, do you have some bands that you like, artists that you?
Oh yeah, of course. I listen a lot to world music, as it's called. It could be from Brazil, it could be from Africa, it could be from Spain, Portugal. I love Fado, for instance, Portuguese blues, as I like to call it. I like Balkan music, gypsy music, gypsy jazz. Django Reinhardt, best player of all times, in my opinion. And and classical music. I listen a lot of classical music. Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Debussy, Chopin, you name it. For me, all music that is made from the heart,
yes,
is great for me. And it depends on my mood. It's okay.
Yes.
It's very great talking to you, and I'm really looking forward to come to South America finally after all those years. And I hope to come back as often as possible. with my band.
Oh, great.
Would be great.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I think that's it. So I have to say thank you for accepting our invitation here. It's a big pleasure with you to be with you here. I hope you can see you in the shows, in the concert here in Curitiba and in São Paulo.
Thank
So,
you very much.
So,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Adrian.
Bye
My
bye.
pleasure. I hope to see you soon.
Magic.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Cover, see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.